Today on Rebel Then King, we are comparing and contrasting the two new classes, the Commander and the Guardian, to see which one comes out on top. Welcome, adventurers. So we have two new classes. This is awesome. They're kind of similar, kind of different. We're going to take a look at how they start out, how they progress, and, some of the intangibles about them. Before I get going too far, I just want to say this is going to be kind of a new style of format for me. So leave some comments letting me know if you like this, if you like the layout, the audio, as well as the slides and the content in them, because I do think I might revisit some of my previous class versus class videos and put them through this kind of a lens, because I think I'm able to pack a lot more information in there. Then the last thing to remind you of is that I do have memberships available now. So if you want some exclusive membership only content, like my homebrew Commander style class that I actually made about a year before the Commander came out, check out the membership. With all that said, let's dive into the Commander versus the Guardian. The starting numbers here. The Commander is an intelligence-based class. It's what you'd call a near martial. So you're going to have a max of +3 strength or dex for your martial abilities at level 1, whereas the Guardian is only strength-based, so it is a full martial. The Commander has a pretty standard 8 hit points per level, whereas the Guardian has a whopping maximum of 12. The only other class that has that is the Barbarian. The Commander starts out as an expert in perception, whereas the Guardian is only trained, and their saves are pretty similar. They are both trained in 1 save and an expert in 2, though which ones they are differing. So the Commander is only trained in fortitude, whereas it is an expert in reflex and will. The Guardian is an expert in fortitude, as you might expect with this very tanky class. It is only trained in reflex because it's, big and tanky, and it is also an expert in will. The starting skills, the Commander is trained in 2 plus their intelligence modifier, and since it is an intelligence-based class, that's likely going to be 6 total skills plus warfare lore. The Guardian is trained in 3 plus their intelligence modifier. I'm thinking you're not going to have very many high intelligence Guardians, so that's going to be like 4 skills plus athletics. They are both trained in simple martial weapons and unarmed strikes, and they are both trained in all types of armor. So, who do I think has the slight edge based on the starting numbers? I'm going to give it to the Guardian. I love the commitment to strength and hit points here. It is awesome to have finally a second 12 hit point per level class, and that is a change from the playtest, so go Guardian. Now onto the design and the complexity of the two classes. They're pretty similar in amount of text. Commander is 15 pages, the Guardian was 13. The Commander has 3 unique core concepts. These are things unique to the class. You have banners and how they work. Yes, there are also banners introduced as new item types in the game, though realistically, you're going to have to learn about banners to play as a Commander, whereas I don't think a lot of other characters are even going to pick up banners, so I'm still counting it as a unique core concept here. You have your tactics and your folio, which is very akin to spells in a spell book, and then you have drilled reactions. Now, the Guardian does have, I think, 4 unique core concepts. You have Guardian's Armor, which is a flat damage reduction to physical damage on your armor. You have Taunt, which is your mechanic to taunt an enemy. It's an action. If they ignore that taunt, they're off guard, and they take a penalty to ignore your taunt and to attack creatures other than you. You have Ever Ready, which is some text about perception and initiative, stating that you do get to always use your Guardian feature reactions before your first round. And then you have Intercept Attack, which is your ability to step in front of an enemy who is striking at an ally, attacking an ally, and you take that damage instead. They each start with the same general feat, Shield Block, and the Commander does have 5 tactics that you can pick at level 1, 3 of which are active at a time. The Guardian doesn't really have anything else to learn at level 1. So, what do I think about this? I think, again, the Guardian comes out a little bit ahead. I think it is just a super sleek, perfect design. It is much improved from the playtest, which is maybe partially skewing my judgment here, whereas the Commander is pretty similar to the playtest. The Guardian also has core abilities that really work in conjunction with each other. You want to throw yourself in the way of those attacks with intercept attack because you have damage reduction from Guardian's armor. You have the ability to intercept attack much better due to Ever Ready. You want to take the taunt because, again, you have Guardian's armor and the hit points. It's just a great design. And now let's talk about the feats. And if there's one slide in this presentation that you want to slow down and look at in detail, it is this one. I've gone through every single feat for each of the classes and done my best to categorize them in sort of the best ways that I saw fit. Now, with the Commander, what you see is a wide variety of types of feats and a pretty even distribution of feats into those different types. Whereas with the Guardian, you're going to see a huge emphasis on this, what I call position, protect, and harass, and then kind of an even spread in just a few other categories beyond that. Let's take a look through the Commander feats. The first kind of category that I have here is called Protect Self. It is just a way to make you, the Guardian, more protected. There's really only one thing I found here, and that is Armored Regiment Training. There are a lot of what I call the knowledge awareness. These are things to increase your abilities, whether that's your modifiers or your frequency of recall knowledge and awareness. We got combat assessment, adaptive stratagem, rapid assessment, observational analysis, unrivaled analysis, and perfect evaluations. These are all things that just make you more aware and knowledgeable of what's happening on the battlefield. I also categorized trickery/debuffs. These are deceptive tactics. These are things that confuse and befuddle your enemies, like reactive interference, demand surrender, mercenary reversal, where you can actually talk enemies out of being enemies into joining allies or becoming an ally. So this is a very cool kind of ambassador-like set of feats. There's a whole companion route. You can have an animal companion as a commander, and there's like a lineage of feats for that. There's healing. You have officer's medical training, which grants you battle medicine and allows you to use your intelligence modifier, a lot like the forensic medicine investigator, for your medicine checks. And then there are some banner abilities that offer hit points or temporary hit points and healing in your banner's aura. There are some that improve your squad defenses here. So not personal, but things like defensive swap, banner twirl, banner's inspiration, shield warden, defiant banner, and standard bearer's sacrifice are all abilities to help further the protection of you and your squad mates, mostly your squad mates. You of course have things that buff attacks and your complicated maneuvers and things. Guiding shot, very like sniper Overwatch kind of thing. You make a range strike, and that can actually set up your other allies and squad mates. Setup strike, unsteadying strike, reactive strike, fortunate blow, quickening maneuvers, glorious banner, pennant of victory. There is a set of feats that are just about making better use of tactics, kind of like meta magic feats in a way. Tactical expansion, which is akin, I would say, to cantrip expansion, very similar thing. You can prepare more in a day. Efficient preparation, drilled reflexes, which allows you to give an extra reaction to another squad mate. Contact with the enemy, allowing you to swap your tactics kind of at will. And then there is a little bit towards skill training as well with officer's education. Now with the Guardian, again, huge emphasis on this middle category of position, protect, and harass. These are all feats that are about getting into an enemy formation, getting up front, getting in the way, creating, it's not necessarily difficult terrain, but hampering abilities, grabbing people, shoving them out of the way, slowing them down, stunning them, intercepting their movement, getting in, just all of these kinds of things. A lot of athletic maneuvers, lots of abilities that do a little bit of damage, but then also have a sort of positional or speed or action economy debuff. There is literally a stomp ground, like the classic tank maneuver in every video game ever. We got it. We finally got it here in the Guardian. But outside of those, you do have some abilities that increase your ability to protect your team. With Bodyguard, you basically designate someone who you are personally bodyguarding and you are better at protecting them. Covering stance, area armor, abilities to block larger areas. You have Energy Interceptor, so you can actually block energy damage in addition to physical damage. Shield from arrows, get behind me, blanket defense, those types of things. You do have some feats that are all about making better use of your shield. Reactive shield, shielding taunt, improved reflexive shield, shield from spells, great shield mastery, these kinds of things. Abilities to improve your taunting, and it's again, this is a little meta magic like long distance taunt, very akin to reach spell. Taunting strike, proud nail, ring their bell, group taunt, okay, making a little bit multiple target, weakening assault. There is one weapon related feat that I saw, raise haft. This basically allows you to use a two-handed weapon and use some of the parrying and shield abilities of the Guardian, but with a parry weapon instead. And then you do have some abilities I marked as protect self. These are things that make you even more defensive. Shield your eyes, armored courage, mighty bulwark, sure-footed, tough cookie, keep up the good fight, perfect protection, unyielding force. Okay, so what do I think here? I think this is about equal. I'm going to give this one a tie. I love the variety in the commander's tactics. The one thing I think about, though, is with such an even split in I said tactics earlier, I meant features and feats. Within the feats and especially since a lot of them have requirements, like you must take this feat in order to get, the one later. It almost seems like a subclass to me. And I like subclass design. Neither of these do have a subclass, so oh well. But I almost say, like, why isn't there just a medic subclass of the commander with these healing, feat tree? Like we have the forensic medicine investigator. Why isn't there sort of an espionage or counter espionage or counter intelligence subclass that is all the trickery and debuffs? Why isn't there a heroic leader subclass that is all of these improving attacks and leading from the front? It kind of seems like once you pick one of these, you'd go down that route anyway. So it might just be better to organize it in that way. That is what's keeping me from giving the commander the win. Now, the Guardian feats, I like that it is a little bit more singular focused, and they are saying, look, you are about protecting and harassing, and that is what you do, but you do get some sort of subsets beyond that. You could either say, you're making yourself extra tanky with all the protect self stuff. You could say you are a little bit more concerned with protecting your team and not so much about harassing and hampering the enemy with the increased team protection. And then I do like this ability to be like a master shield user. We don't have a lot of that with the improved shield use. So good stuff from both classes here. On to how these characters progress, okay? Starting with the class DC, which is more important for the commander because they will have multiple feats that are all based on your class DC, making saves against it. It's still important for the Guardian for some feats, but remember the taunt in the playtest was against your class DC and it no longer is, so you don't need as high of a class DC, frankly, for a Guardian, which is good because the commander does progress further, or faster at least, I should say, with its first bump to expert at level 17. They are level 7, not 17. That would be awful. The progression after that is actually identical. Master at 15, legendary at 19. At level 3, they each get what I call a special. The commander becomes an expert in warfare lore, and they can use that warfare lore for initiative. And the Guardian gains the Die Hard feat, doubling down on toughness. Weapons is interesting. Both expert weapon training at level 5, as you would expect. But the commander gains critical specialization at this point, whereas the Guardian does not. The commander gets weapon specialization at level 7. The Guardian doesn't until level 11. So that is a huge advantage to the commander. Despite not being a full marshal, I think they are going to be better at using weapons here. We get both master weapon training at level 13, and then the commander gets greater weapon specialization at 15, where it takes the Guardian until level 17 for that. So I think this is an advantage in weapons to the commander. Armor, no surprise, the Guardian comes out way ahead. They get their first boost, expert in armor, and only in medium and heavy actually, at level 5 only. It takes the commander until level 11 to move up to expert armor training. The commander then moves up to mastery at level 17, but that Guardian achieves mastery only at level 11, and then legendary at 15. I think it would be great if it was 17 or even 19th level that you got legendary armor training. It is 15. That is a fantastic armor progression. Saves are pretty similar here. The Guardian does get the earlier bump, moving to reflex at level 7, whereas the commander doesn't get its first expert bump until level 9. But then it takes the Guardian to level 17 to get its last bump, whereas the last bump for the commander is level 15. So kind of a wash there, I think. Perception, the commander, remember, started as expert. They move to master at level 13. The Guardian, this is interesting. They do move to expert at 17, but they also get an extra reaction. I missed this the first time through. Going through, the text after the upgrade states, at the start of each of your turns, you gain an additional reaction that you can use only for reactions from Guardian feats or class features, including shield block. If you have the ever ready class feature, you can gain this additional reaction when you roll initiative for combat. So y'all, you can take your 3 actions, and then an enemy attacks and you intercept strike as your first reaction. And then maybe that enemy says, well, I'm going to attack you now. So they attack you. And then you shield block it as your second reaction. That is the way to hack the action economy. So who do I think wins here? I'm going to give the nod to the commander. I really like the progression of the weapon training. I think it's very appropriate for this intelligence-based cunning class to kind of have maybe slightly more infrequent strikes and hits, but for them to be devastating. Like they hit once and they hit hard. And then I think the rest of the bumps, like the armor, you don't need it as much as this class that is going to maybe be up front, but probably a little bit more near support. So I think that the progression really supports the gameplay even more than the Guardian progression does, though I, of course, love the armor progression for the Guardian. Now for the role and the effectiveness of these classes. The commander is mostly a support class. Mostly you're supporting with action economy boosts, some debuffing, some buffing, skills, and knowledge. I think damage is kind of your secondary. Again, you got the martial weapon training and the very good progression, the critical specialization, the earlier weapon specialization. Try to make one good strike, at least every other round, if not every round as a commander. And then I think maybe tertiary would be healing, since that is one of the sort of feat progressions and feat trees, I guess, for this class. As far as the effectiveness goes, I think it depends on your squad. It depends a lot on your squad and your choice of tactics. Look, if you choose a bunch of melee tactics for a range-heavy party, you are going to be a very ineffective commander. If you have a party of 3 and your commander is one of them, I don't know that you would be that effective either. I think the commander will be great in larger parties, 4 or 5, because you can pick different tactics and affect a few squad mates with one in your round and then a few squad mates with the other. Because remember, it's not like you're just giving out dozens of free reactions. You are eating people's reactions. You do have the ability where one squad mate initially, due to drilled reactions, can use an extra reaction on one of your tactics, but that's just one squad mate. So bigger squads, more diverse squads, I think are going to do better with a commander. I do think the action economy for anything other than your tactics might be tough. There are 2 action tactics and 1 action tactics. Obviously, if you're going to issue 2, well, you're going to either use all of your actions on tactics or leave only 1 action for yourself. Though do remember, you are your own squadmate. So if you issue a reload, for example, you also get to reload as part of that. So keep that in mind. And then, yes, your attack accuracy will lag, which means even though you do have critical specialization, you're probably going to rely on a lot of nat 20s for crits, so maybe you don't get the best use out of that. Now, as far as the Guardian, you are a tank. Damage resistance, hit points, shield, and armor. You absorb damage. That is your first role. Support, I think, is your second role, especially with the hampering and distracting the enemy, a lot of interrupting of enemy movements, not necessarily support in the way that we often think of applying debuffs, though there of course is some, and also not traditional buffs. You're not doing a lot of, granting someone a bonus on their next skill check or anything like that, but you do have protective abilities, which certainly counts as support. And then I think damage is your third role. You do have martial weapon training, you have some feats. A lot of the feats actually do a little bit of damage and a little bit of hampering, so you're always going to be doing some chip damage along the way. As far as the effectiveness, you could not be any tougher. You really couldn't. I mean, maybe they could throw in temp hit points at the start of battle 2 or something like that, which probably it doesn't need. But between the 12 hit points per level, the heavy armor training, the fast armor progression, and that Guardian's armor with the flat static damage reduction, you're doing great. You impose your will, which I think is so fun. So many of the feats are about getting up in there and just causing chaos around you. There's a great feature synergy, as I talked about earlier, where you have this great armor, which means you do want to step in the way of an attack. You have taunt, and if the taunted creature chooses not to attack you, well, not only does your better armor encourage you to jump in front of the way, but also you get to extend the range on how long you can travel before intercepting attack if the creature is the subject of your taunt. So everything works together so well with this class. You do have great attack accuracy, but kind of limited weapon choice and a little bit limited in your weapon abilities as you, compared to like a lot of full marshals who are getting a bunch of specialization and things like that. So who do I think comes out ahead here? I think it's equal. I mean, I put it this way. I think it's possible to have a pretty ineffective commander. I think it is also possible to have a commander who breaks the game with its effectiveness. I don't think it's very possible to have a bad Guardian. I think you're going to build at least a decent Guardian, and I think you're going to have some very good, if not great Guardians, depending on your build features, the feats you pick, how well it plays with your ancestry, and how well it plays with your squad mates. I think basically the commander has a lower floor. You can build a bad one, but a higher ceiling. You can build an extremely effective commander. I think the Guardian is a bit narrower. You can build an okay, but it's always going to be pretty good Guardian, and then you can build a pretty great Guardian. I don't think it'll achieve the high levels that the commander does. So therefore, maybe one is a little bit better for power gamers or more experienced people. The other is just kind of better in most parties for most players. So it's even. And now for what I call the intangibles, the kind of things that aren't measured necessarily. Starting with uniqueness. The commander is truly one of a kind. Yes, there are other buffing support classes out there. Most of what we've seen so far, though, is about granting bonuses to actions or DCs of your squad mate, or your allies, I should say. I shouldn't use squad mates. That only applies when you have a commander. This ability to give people commands and let them react only applies to the commander. So that is super cool. The role play of it. I think it's got a variety. You can have like a learned scholarly background, a very like proper upbringing officer. You could also be kind of harsh and domineering if you wanted to, or maybe kind, astute, and understanding. So a good variety of roleplay options here. As far as the gameplay goes, and this is mostly based on, what I think, because I have not played as a commander yet. This is what I think. I think being helpful is fun, but rolling dice is more fun. I think that only 3 tactics could feel a little bit limiting, like, well, this one works really well, so each turn I'm going to do 1 tactic, 2 tactic, and then move, and then repeat. And as part of that, I think that the action economy for me time, doing things that you, your own self, the character do, could be tough. Again, there are 2 action tactics and 1 action tactics. You could very well get in a habit of just doing those 2 tactics that eat up all 3 of your actions every turn, or maybe issuing 2 commands and only having 1 action for yourself. As far as the Guardian goes, it's pretty unique, but it is a little similar to Champion. In fact, you could almost argue it could be a cause of the Champion, with this like flat damage resistance, and the Champion's reaction would be intercept attack. You would be pretty close to being a Champion at that point. That is still on paper what the Guardian does. So it's unique. It is better at tanking than the Champion, for sure. They're different. It's not gishy, whereas the Champion is gishy, so that is a difference. But I think it's absolutely less unique than the Commander. As far as the roleplay, a lot of it is geared towards like you're the big, friendly, helpful brute who delights in wrecking the enemy's plans. I see it as being a little less flexible in roleplay than the Commander, but not necessarily so. As far as the gameplay, 3 actions plus a reaction equals you are going to always be engaged. You have your turn, and then in between your turns, you are looking out for abilities to use your reactions. You are encouraged to get in the mix and roll dice a lot. And I think saving allies from harm is always heroic, whereas issuing commands is not. The way I kind of think of this is like, I see the Commander as an allowance. $5 a week for doing chores. Where I think the Guardian is more of a big financial gift. Even if it's the same amount of money, let's say at the end of the summer, the chores and the allowance feel like a given. It feels like, hey, Commander, give me tactics. That's what you do. Every turn, give me a tactic. Let's go. Whereas the Guardian and that like, whoa, I thought I was going to get clobbered and you just saved me, always feels like a big moment. So I think having big moments is going to feel better, and rolling the dice more often on your own is going to feel better than the gameplay of the Commander. So who do I give the nod to in this round? Kind of obviously the Guardian, right? Like, I think that the fun of gameplay is going to beat out most intangibles and even tangibles. If there are 2 classes and technically on paper, one lags behind in almost every category, but it's more fun to play, that's probably what you're going to choose, right? And I think that's what we have here with the Guardian. And this means that the winner of this first side-by-side comparison is indeed the Guardian. I gave them the win in 3 categories, they lost 1 category, and they tied in 2. That is not to say that the Commander is a bad class. I consider this to be a pretty equal score, all things considered. I think that the Commander is just going to be slightly more difficult to play well, I should say. I think it's going to depend slightly more on your party. I think there are some parties where you would struggle to add a Commander. Small parties with if you had a ranged ranger, a sorcerer, and a light combat fighter like a monk, I don't know that a Commander would be super effective. It certainly would not be what I'd pick for a party of 3, that's for sure. A Guardian, I think you could drop into any party and it would be effective. That's kind of what it comes down to. And the fact, like I said on the last slide, I simply think that the Guardian would be a little more fun to play. But I think if you truly enjoy tactics, which I do a lot, I think the commander's high skill level and high ability to absolutely change encounters could make it a great choice for anybody. So even though the Guardian is my winner, they're still both winners in my book, even though the book says Guardian. Well, that is all adventurers. So again, let me know what you think of this format. I think I'm going to do more like this in the future. I think it's a lot of information in a pretty digestible medium with some good context thrown in, but let me know if you agree, disagree, would do things differently, would strongly encourage some parts to stay as is. Let me know in the comments. I'll catch you next time, adventurers.